Welcome to the TTT News Special. I'm DK Rostar. Now, the Twitterverse is fabulous. It's both a place for good and ill. Now, I started following some food for thought from spaces curated by owner and executive chairman of Mount Irvine Bay Resort and a director of the Tobago Hospitality and Tourism Association, Jaqueline Yorke-Westcott. Now, she's a civil engineer, someone practically and academically trained in corporate services management, training and human resource management, a consultant in organizational development and HR. And as such, I believe she has the experience and the ability to traverse the left brain, right brain pathways to a touchy subject that can raise hairs and leave people toting feelings, namely that of reopening our borders. Jaqueline, thank you so much for making the time.
Good afternoon, and thank you, DK.
Now, I want to start off with some of your first thoughts on hearing that the borders were going to be reopened. What are some of the things that immediately sprung to mind?
Well, I'm happy we have a date to work towards and a date in which to get our collective house in order. It would be very beneficial if the government could further tell us how they will treat with the air bridge and sea bridge between the islands, because as you know, right now that's under 50%. How and when international travel will be resumed, and also give us some more information on nationals who want to leave the country. What protocols will they have and to exit and to return? And also which international airlines are resuming travel to Trinidad and Tobago.
All right, now it's one thing to have a plan, and that plan may be the best thing in the world, but the road to hell sometimes, as we know, can be paved with good intentions. So what's the importance of communicating that reopening plan effectively so that you have different stakeholders actively on board?
Well, one of the things that we've learned through this pandemic is that communication is paramount. And also, as we are living very much in the internet age, and most people are getting their information from there, it's important to have a good web presence on this. And this, I would think we want to have one website, Visit Trinidad and Tobago, that people go to. I'm sure you are aware that there are two bodies responsible for tourism in Trinidad and Tobago. One is responsible for Trinidad, one is responsible for Tobago. But this is one time when we want to speak with a united voice. So people go to one website, which tells you what the protocols are, what they need to come in and out of the country, what dates they need to prepare for, how long in advance they need to have PCR tests, whether they need to be vaccinated or not. We should not duplicate our efforts. There should be one point of reference. And I'm still going to be lots of unanswered questions. For example, I'm coming to Tobago from United States, and I'm coming through Trinidad. What do I need to do? So what do I need in terms of inter-island travel? What is the treatment of non-nationals going to be? What is the cost of quarantine? What is the choice of facilities? These are all the things that need to be on one website that people can see, right. This is what I need to know to get in and out of Trinidad and Tobago.
And the way that I see you just rattling these things off, it seems as though these are things that you deal with on a daily basis. These are some of the things that you think about. And with that, though, I want you to itemize some of the players involved. And I give the example of Bunji Garlin singing Heart of a People and using that song to give examples that we may think that these are the players in Carnival. But the players in Carnival, the stakeholders, are so much more. The people who look at your vehicle when you're in the fete, the people who run an ice, the people who are cooking. Who are some of these players that are involved and will be impacted, in your view, by the reopening of the borders?
Yes, and obviously the relevant ministries need to be involved, whether it's health, national security, the aviation body needs to come into under this as well. And I would think the stakeholders as well would be the relevant tourism authorities. We have Trinidad and Tobago, well, we have the Trinidad Tourism Limited, and we have the Tourism Tobago Agency Limited. And it would be a good idea also to have the heads of the relevant associations, which would be the Tourism and Hospitality Association for both islands, because we need to have one protocol. It's no good having one protocol for tour operators and another, for example, people who are coming in on a cruise and may want to take a tour, and another protocol for people who are coming in by air. So we really need to talk with everybody to see what works. We need to talk with the Ministry of Transport as well as to people who are vaccinated versus people who are unvaccinated. Are they going to be transported in separate vehicles coming from airport or coming off the ferry? These are all things that need to be discussed at a group level rather than just be handed down as a directive.
And I like the fact, I appreciate the way you're dancing in terms of getting some of these factors and stakeholders out, while at the same time trying to remain as objective as possible and saying, okay, well, these are the issues, these are the things that need to be considered, because I try to do that dance as well. But do you see factors for concern? Do you see any challenges at this point?
Definitely, there are lots of challenges. One point of concern for me right now is I'm happy that the government has told us that the borders will be reopening on the 17th of July, and that will mainly be to bring stranded nationals home. I get that, I appreciate that. But we also need to have dates as to when they are going to allow tourism. When are they going to allow non-nationals to return, and what those protocols are going to be? And of course, in line with all of this, we have to continue our robust vaccination program. We can't let up on that. And how are we going to handle the possible incoming of people carrying a variant of COVID? What is the ease of travel going to be like? What pre-travel immigration and customs requirements are? There should be some sort of standardization that needs to be communicated now so that stakeholders like me can get our houses in order.
So if I were able to put on the hat of a policymaker and say, okay, well, Jaqueline, you're going to have some influence here. What are some of those incremental steps that you'd suggest to move towards efficiently and safely, I dare say, reopening our borders?
Well, one of the things we need to know is with the current state of emergency and restrictions, will those still be enforced when the borders open? Because depending on whether those are enforced or not, that also will regulate hours of business. So that's one step. And as I said, we need to know the dates so that we can work towards certain dates. I'll come back to the air and sea bridge. We haven't been told whether or not travel between Trinidad and Tobago will be normalized, that is back to 50%, back to 100%. And that's important because until international travel resumes, the local tourism sector still has to depend on the local tourists.
All right, and with that, I think we want to take a short break right about now. We return with so much more. We're speaking with Jaqueline Yorke-Westcott. Stay with us. This is the TTT News Special. Welcome back. We are speaking about reopening our borders, be it not just for reopening's sake or for tourism. We're doing this with Jaqueline Yorke-Westcott. Thank you once more for making the time, Jaqueline. Now, I'm wondering though, in terms of looking and seeing best practices outside of Trinidad and Tobago, are there any models that we can draw from?
Yes, certainly. The other islands within the region have reopened to tourists, notably Barbados. And I think we could follow the Bajans plan because they have everything online. So long before you come to the island, you know what requirements will be required for entry. You fill in your immigration and customs form before entry. You upload your PCR tests and vaccination scanned card before entry. So it makes it a much smoother process than dealing with paper. And I know we love paper in Trinidad and Tobago, but I think we need to realize we are now in the 21st century and things simply are not going back to how they were before 2019. We could also look at what's going on in Antigua, in Grenada. There's a lot that we can take from. We don't need to reinvent the wheel on this one. The other islands are doing it, and we can do it as well.
But one of the things that was pointed out was that different territories or different jurisdictions would have different situations that might lead to some nuances that we may not be able to take wholesale. Does that factor into some of these things that you're talking about?
Yes, of course. We know that, as you said, different countries have different legal requirements, different laws, different customs, obviously. But if we could get most of the pre-travel process online so that the authorities at Trinidad and Tobago know exactly who's coming 72 hours before they get here because they've already seen that this person has a negative PCR test, this person has been vaccinated, that the person who is entering the country knows, well, I have a choice of 3 different types of facilities, and they know what the cost of those facilities are going to be if they need to quarantine. These are things that will make it so much easier than people just arriving and then looking around and saying, well, what do we do now?
That look reminds me, it could be all so simple, but we rather make it hard, to quote a young lady, but
Yes.
Lauren Hill. But
Yes.
I started off this conversation saying that one of the places that I saw some of your opinions, some of your thoughts on this matter is Twitter and Twitter Spaces. Now, what is the significance of engaging these kind of discussions and different people on this space in the manner that you're doing? This is to your perception.
Well, actually, DK, I think you've answered your own question in that it's the significance of engaging different people. We're not hearing the same voices all the time. And Twitter is largely a young platform, and it's a way for young people to get more involved with what's happening in the country. It's a way for them to get more involved in the different sectors that Trinidad and Tobago has to offer. Because while tourism only contributes 7% to our GDP, it is actually one of the most important earners of foreign exchange. And this is something that the wider public needs to know, and they need to know that there's a career for them in tourism. There are viable jobs and options within tourism. And I think people don't know enough about how tourism works in Trinidad and Tobago, whether it's local tourism or international tourism. So I have been enjoying the spaces and the questions that people are asking because people want to know. And they want to hear from different voices rather than just being told in the traditional way. This is a way that young people find very accessible rather than being handed a pamphlet or being told to go and research it on a website or read a book.
One of the things that I use sometimes, and the fact that we're dealing with a pandemic now, I guess makes me turn my face a little bit. But I sometimes use the example of a health flyer. So all the information is there, but it's packed so tightly, it's crammed together. It's almost as though all the information is there, but you can't see anything. But I want to go back to some of those questions that you were referencing, though. What are some of those questions that really stood out to you and some of those engagements on the Twitter space about this topic?
Well, as I said, a lot of people didn't really appreciate that there is a subtle difference between local tourism and international tourism, because what we would want as Trinbagonians when we take staycations is quite different from what a traveler, a visitor to Trinidad and Tobago might want. And also, although we know that there are so many different sectors, we haven't quite figured out yet how to, I don't want to say how to monetize them. I want to say how to make them greater, because Trinidad and Tobago could easily be the food capital of the Caribbean. given our diversity and our culinary skills, it breaks my heart when I see Barbados calling themselves the food capital. We also have great sports tourism here that we could be making more of. Environmental tourism. I mean, honest to God, we have got two of the most diverse, unspoiled islands within the Caribbean that we are not making the most of. Event tourism. If there's one person who knows how to throw a party, it's a Trini. There's so much more that we could be doing. So these are different sectors that people could be getting involved in, and also promoting not just locally. We tend to do things for ourselves. And I think that the recent controversy with Michael Jordan has shown us that, hey, there is a market for our stuff out there. We just have to learn how to do it properly before somebody else does.
But where do we start this conversation, or where do we start the action and implementation from, Jaqueline? And I ask that because is it, and not even going to the chicken or the egg, but is it, do we start from schools, be it primary or tertiary, to add a level of validity to it? Is it that we need to have civics in school? Is it that from the ground up, from the family unit, we need to be learning and imbibing our culture and our history in a manner that we cherish it more, as opposed to you see somebody pick it up and now you want back your toy, or now you want back your name because you see somebody else placing value in it and wanting to run with it like Mr. Killer?
Yes, DK, you have put that so eloquently. And I have found myself frequently saying, particularly in these last couple of months, that if you do not take pride in something, you cannot cherish it, and you cannot preserve it, and you cannot promote it to anybody else. One thing I have noticed in other jurisdictions is that there is a tremendous pride in their country. We as Trinbagonians take for granted what we have. We don't realize that we have so much. It has made us complacent. And I agree with you. It starts in the home, it starts with civics. From kindergarten straight up, everybody should be learning about their country, what their country has to offer, so that they take pride in it and preserve it. It always makes me sad every time we have a beach cleanup or a river cleanup to see the amount of garbage that we throw away, and the way that we clog up our waterways. Whereas somebody coming from United States or from Scandinavia, for example, in Sweden, coming here, do you know how much they would treasure being able to go to a clean river with a waterfall? They're willing to come here for that. And these are things that we just take for granted. So I think we need more pride in ourselves and what we have.
And I look at how many times we have different iteration of this story replay itself, unfold. I remember the instance of Ralph McDonald saying, with a kind of shrug of his shoulders, and well, all right, that he had offered the government of Trinidad and Tobago at the time, I think it was the Ministry of Tourism, the song Just the Two of Us, to market the Twin Island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And they said, nah, man, we good. And he was like, okay. And that song is an iconic one to this day. So how many more lessons do we need before we learn and we understand the concept?
I honestly don't know, but I know that people like myself will keep banging on doors and keep trying to get the government to understand that, hey, we're in a Forex crunch. The fastest way to get out of that crunch is to put people on a plane and get them to Trinidad and Tobago. And the only way we can do that is if we have something great to offer. When I visit the other Caribbean territories, they're very pretty. They all have something unique, all have something different, but nothing compares to what we have here in Trinidad and Tobago. And the government really needs to start paying serious attention to tourism and treat it a little better, because we could do so much more. And in particular, I would also like to see some sort of outreach on a CARICOM level, because I think that if we had standards that apply across the CARICOM territories, that would make it so much easier for the person who wants to come to visit let's say 2 or 3 islands. So instead of just saying in Trinidad and Tobago, they may also want to visit Grenada, they may want to visit Curacao, and there should be ways that we could facilitate that.
All right, and with that, we say thank you very much. But we're putting in the plug that the next Twitter space that you will be hosting will be this Thursday, July 1 at 7:30 p.m. And the topic will be tourism operational pillars. Jaqueline Yorke-Westcott, thank you so much for giving us some more food for thought. And you know, sometimes we need a little spoonful of sugar because the medicine or the lesson we may not want to be accepted wholesale, but at the same time, if it makes sense, Mommy say pick sense from nonsense. And on behalf of the entire news team, I'm DK Roster. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good one.